Please welcome Michelle Mower.
All right, like the gentleman said, I am Michelle Mower. I'm the CEO of Imagination Worldwide, which is an international sales and distribution company based out of Los Angeles. I am from Houston and do still live here. For the most part, I have an apartment out there that I, crash every once in a while. But for the most part, I'm based here, and the company is based in Los Angeles, and I do most of my work right here on this little laptop. Pretty cool, huh? So the presentation today is about understanding the motion picture distribution, understanding motion picture distribution and the marketplace, which is I have found over the years one of the most difficult aspects of the process for filmmakers to understand. Even filmmakers who have a lot of experience in other aspects of the industry don't truly know or understand how distribution works. And myself included, when I acquired the company, I thought I understood how distribution worked, and then I got into doing distribution and realized how it really worked. So today, my presentation is sort of unique in that I actually took a presentation that I normally give to prospective investors in films, because I'm one of those rare, unique individuals who feels like the more my investor knows, the better. Most producers don't feel the same as I do. Most of them are like, let's just not tell the investors about this. Let's just, that's not me. I want my investors to be educated and understand fully what they're getting into, and so should everyone. So I've adapted a little bit. So what you're going to be getting as a part of this presentation isn't just about about distribution, but how to package a film, how to put together a film so that when it comes time to distribute your movie, you actually have a product you can sell, right? Yes. We want to sell our movies, right? Yeah, we're not just making it for mom and dad and cousins and uncles. Some people do. I don't know. I don't know why you would. It's a very stressful endeavor to go into. There's a lot easier ways of making your parents proud than making movies. Trust me. So okay, so let's start first and just talk in general about the film industry itself and the transformation of the film industry, because it truly is in a transformational play. I mean, it's always evolving, always changing. And a number of years ago, as you know, the industry began as very much studio driven, right? I mean, it started from, some ragtag individuals like, creating, like Jenny talked about earlier, with the silent film era, and all kinds of people out there making all kinds of cameras. And so I guess on some level it started independently, but when it became a true viable industry was when we started getting the studios, the 20th century and Fox and the Warner Bros., the big studios, right? And for many, many years they reigned supreme. You could not get a movie made unless, for the most part, and get into theaters unless you went through a studio. That started to change eventually as, we started getting, we had 16mm cameras, 8mm cameras, and filmmakers started, and a lot of these were being used for news gathering, actually. And then some very bright, young, talented, creative people said, hey, these actually can make pretty cool pictures too. Let's start making indie films on 16mm and even 8mm and Super 8. So around the 70s especially, you started seeing just this huge, independent film movement begin. And it actually began right here in Houston as well. Houston was a big part of that movement. Organizations like SWAMP, Southwest Alternate Media Project, were very much on the forefront of the independent film movement in the 70s, and continue to be around to help support and nurture independent filmmakers. So, but what's happening now is that the studios have sort of returned to that big blockbuster studio-centric model, that strategy. They've acquired. They're making Marvel movies and comic book movies that are just cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make. I mean, it's extremely next to impossible for independent filmmakers to get those kinds of budgets for their films, right? So that's happening. But in some ways, it's actually creating a market for independent films, because when the studios aren't making the $20 million dramas and some of the smaller comedies, well, then who are making those? Independent filmmakers, right? So I really think that the independent film has sort of come into its own and become mainstream. You can go to the movie theaters now, and I'd say half, if not more than half, of the films that are shown there are independent films. Started out as independent films, right? That went through Sundance or Toronto or some of the film festivals. So now it's not just about making your movie. You also have to be smart about how to make your movie. So another big change that's happening in the film industry is there's a decrease in physical media and an increase in digital delivery. That's important because that makes it more affordable than ever to not just make a movie, but also to distribute it, right? The problem is that now anybody can make a movie and distribute it. So the marketplace is very oversaturated with content, very oversaturated. I tell people this all the time, and you're going to hate me for saying this, but the motion picture marketplace right now is so oversaturated with content, it doesn't need more independent films. It doesn't need more independent films. What it needs are more unique voices telling unique stories and people who are putting together packaged projects that can actually be sold to the buyers. The buyers are looking for very specific type of content, and we'll get to that in a minute. The film industry is shifting to a consumer-driven model. So previously it had been market-driven, right? So the buyers come out and they say, okay, I need, so many of this kinds of film, so many of horror, so many comedy, so many drama, and they give you sort of like a laundry list of what they're looking for, and the buyer and the distributors and the sales agents find those films and bring them to the buyers, right? That was sort of how the market worked. Now, because consumers can go directly to the market, they can go directly to the audience and the buyers, then you're starting to see a new model in which consumers are driving the marketplace, right? And so you're going to see a lot more niche films. The market will largely, say, they're looking for films that can reach as many people as possible, right? Because they want to maximize those dollars. They want to find a film that is of, where the target demographic is very wide, right? Consumer is the opposite. Consumer driven is very niche driven, right? So it's driven by your interests, whether your interests are rooted in, your culture, whether it's rooted in your ethnicity or whatever it is that draws you to go watch a film. That's what's driving the marketplace now. So movie ticket buyers are shifting, the ones who are actually going to the theater. They're an older demographic, right? Because they're used to going to see films on big screens, and they're maybe not as computer savvy as some of the young kids, and although that's shifting as well. And but eventually what's going to happen is for the most part, people are going to be consuming motion pictures on their computers or on their smart TVs or on their cell phones, right? So as movies are, the shift in consumer, the way people consume media changes, the types of films are also going to change. And then there's, of course, a rapid evolution of platforms and revenue streams. Some might call it de-evolution, but but there's a rapid evolution of platforms and revenue streams. So what does that mean? In the past, it was literally like you would have these windows, right? You would have a movie would be released on a big screen at the theater, right? And it'd be there for a few weeks if you're lucky, more than that, right? And then it would go off the screen, and then it would be on, a few months later, it would come out on DVD, on home video, right? And home video was a huge revenue stream for distributors, huge. And then after it sort of, had been out for a while on home video DVD, then you would start seeing it on cable, like HBO, the cable, on paid TV, on subscription TV. And then that was it, right? That was before the internet came along. Well, the internet disrupted everything. So now you don't really have windows like you used to have. You can actually have a movie be released theatrically and on the internet on the same day. It's called day and date release. And a lot of independent films are doing that because what they're trying to do is maximize their marketing dollars. If it's going to be in the theater, they're spending all this money on PR and marketing, right? Well, but they can't have it in every theater across the country necessarily unless they have very deep pockets. So they want to make sure that those ad dollars are being maximized, so they make it also available on like a transactional VOD where it's can be watched from, your, like POV, VOD on your smart TV at home in Milwaukee, for crying out. It doesn't have to be New York or LA, right? So those ad dollars are being maximized. So let's give you a sense of, and of course those revenue streams are increasing and, every day. So let's take a look at just a few. Right? So you have, some of the traditional, obviously we're sitting in the screen, you're sitting in a theater, right? But that's not the only revenue stream. That's not the only revenue stream that that filmmakers can earn money through. There's obviously Showtime, there's HBO, but even those networks have digital streaming sites, right? They have some of them have subscription. Like I know Lifetime has their own subscription service. Stars has a on demand. They have a subscription service. Believe it or not, Blockbuster's still around. They have an on-demand channel. Yay! I know. Amazon Prime, of course, and Hulu and Netflix being the big guys, right? Everybody wants to be on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, but there are many other ones, and not just here in the United States, but all over the world. I was told by someone who this is sort of her area of expertise that globally there's about 3,000 digital platforms for films to be viewed on, right? Now, of those 3,000, maybe 100 of them actually are financially viable, will actually earn you some money, right? But there's that opportunity, right? And so I guess, like I said, it's easier than ever before to get your film out into the world, but it's harder than before to make money doing this, right? So we want to talk about making money. All right, so as a filmmaker, you need to understand the risks from the very beginning of not just producing a film, but also of trying to distribute one, especially if you're trying to get investors, right? Because there's a whole level of risk that's added whenever you're bringing in equity from outside, right? From investors. So here are the top 5 risks overlooked by filmmakers. Number 1, ignoring the importance of pre-securing distribution or pre-securing sales. You need to find out, are your films expecting to sell at a major market? Okay, 98% of the independent films that exist do not get theatrical distribution. That's a hard fact to face, but a true one. Foreign pre-sales are harder to secure due to the overly saturated marketplace, like I mentioned before. And the reason why that is the digital revolution didn't just happen in the United States. It happened everywhere, right? All over the world. So foreign buyers are, if they're looking for independent films, especially independent dramas or comedies, they're looking at their own filmmakers in their own countries because they're making quality films, just as high quality of independent films as we're making in the United States. But even beyond that, they're using talent that are from their countries that are well known, and it's cheaper for them to acquire those films because they don't have to dub them. It's very expensive to dub movies. And so if they're having to acquire independent films, they might as well acquire independent films from their own countries where they don't have to do dubbing. And the stars in those films are known to people within their territories, right? So that's why it's harder than ever to actually sell your films internationally. So risk 2. But before we get to that, let me just sort of give you this model here. So you have the studio model where you go through development, production. Then you have your release windows here that we talked about earlier: theatrical, VOD, digital. Now it used to be home video, but now it's VOD, digital. The video home marketplace hasn't completely gone away, but it's definitely not what it once was. So the VOD, digital. Then you have foreign, and you have television. Independent film, finance films, they have varied budgets, and their distribution is not always guaranteed. So you have development and production, but then are you going to get theatrical? If you don't get theatrical, what are your prospects for VOD and digital and foreign and television? And the reason why this is important to understand is because, your foreign sales, the value of your film is very heavily dependent on how the film performs theatrically here in the United States. It's not to say that your film doesn't have value if it doesn't get a theatrical release. It's just if you're getting investors to put in a couple of $1 million, then you're going to have a theatrical release one way or another, because you have to use that theatrical release to drive up the value in the minds of the foreign buyers, and also with VOD digital and the foreign. Now, the exception to this would be is if you do a direct deal with like Netflix or Amazon, or one of the bigger the bigger digital platforms that will acquire the rights to your film, the worldwide rights to your film. They don't care if you have theatrical, quite frankly. Amazon would like for you to have a theatrical, and they're totally supportive of you doing that. Netflix, they'd rather it just premiere on Netflix, right? So there's exceptions to that. But generally speaking, if I, as your sales agency, I'm sitting across from a buyer with your film and I'm pitching it to them, the number one thing they're going to be asking me is, what was the theatrical release? How many cities? How many markets? How many screens? How many seats in those theaters? I mean, they want that detailed of numbers. They're going to want to know who your talent is. What is, are they A-list? Are they not? Are they TV actors? Who are they? And are those people going to be of interest to audiences in my territory? That's another huge question. So as the filmmaker, as you're developing your film, you need to be able to you need to be thinking about that from the very beginning. Think about that buyer, your sales agent sitting across from your buyer, and how they're going to pitch that movie to your movie to that buyer to get them to take on those rights, right? Let's see. All right, so moving on. Risk 2, the hidden waterfall, Hollywood accounting. We've all heard the stories, right? It's sadly very true, and more common than not. Investors and producers do not have transparency to the distributors' costs and fees. And so transparency is a huge problem with regard to distribution. As well as investors and distributors often have conflicting economic interests, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So it's very common for an independent film to, get into a big film festival like Sundance or, Toronto, South by Southwest, whatever, and get a distribution deal, right? And the filmmakers are like, yes, we made it. We got our distribution deal. We're going to make, it's going to get theatrical release. We're going to make all this money. I'm going to be able to go off and make my next movie and get, The truth of the matter is that that's usually not the case. Usually what happens is the distributor will take that film on, and then they'll put in their own money into it. They'll either put what's called P&A, print and ads from the old film days, but P&A is basically the media that is being used to screen the film, and now it's usually DCPs and advertisement, which is one of the largest costs of distribution. So the filmmakers negotiate a deal. The distributor will guarantee that they'll put in a certain amount of P&A in the film, and what'll oftentimes will happen is that distributor will over-expense that production to the point to where on paper it looks like that film never actually made any money. And so a lot of times they're doing some shady stuff, like they're invoicing their own subsidiaries to keep that money within the company, and just all kinds of shady practices. So filmmakers just have to be really careful and make sure that when you are negotiating a deal with a distributor, that you have an entertainment attorney, not just any attorney, an entertainment attorney who has experience negotiating distribution deals. I'm the distributor telling you this because I'm telling you, people in our industry, they can be shady. And so protecting yourself, get an attorney, it's well worth your money. It'll save you a lot of money down the road. Like I mentioned, investors and distributors often have conflicting economic interests. What do I mean by that? Well, Hollywood accounting creates a waterfall whereby a film may only be profitable for the distributor. Most producers, investors, don't really understand fully what the costs are when they go into these deals. And so most of them don't really understand what the deals they're getting into. So look, here's an example of just some numbers. You have a box office revenue of 10 million, and if you look down at the film's net profit, it's more like 3 million, right? Now some of you are like, that actually would be really good deal, I think, right? But look in column 3, 20 million, and look at all the expenses that the distributors have spent, and down at the bottom it's still negative 600,000. How could it be in Model 1 that the box office was 10 million, and they're getting all of this revenue, and at the end of the day they're bringing in 3.5, where in column 3 they've made 20 million, but they're still in a deficit of 600,000 in net, right? And it's because of how the distributors are allocating that revenue. Sometimes they're reinvesting it back into the P&A for the ancillary markets, for television, for the digital VOD, those types of things. So making sure that you have a constant communication going on with your distributor to make sure that you understand what they're spending, and get that on paper from the very beginning. Put expense caps on your deal. Make sure that you have a way to monitor and control what's being spent on the film. And once they've reached that expense cap, you, the filmmaker, have a right of refusing expenses, so that you understand so they understand that they can't just go spend whatever they want and not really have any, and you, the filmmaker, have no control over that. So let's look at this example. Investors seek to maximize film net receipts, while distributors seek to maximize the distributor's net receipts, right? So in this example here, at what point do you think can y'all all see this? At what point do you think the distributor should have stopped spending? At 12, yep. At 12.5 million, exactly. But clearly they didn't stop. As you see, the distributor's not being hurt by spending more money, but the investor is, right? After 12.5. So the distributor's motivated to spend as much as 27.5, right? Before their profits start declining. So you as the filmmaker need to make sure that you're staying in that constant communication mode with the distributor, so that they're not overexpensing your production. Yep. All right. Risk 3. Filmmakers often will finance films with too much equity. So what does that mean? I mean, if you're dealing with, if your film budget is like under $1 million, you're probably only going to be able to finance it with equity. But if you're trying to go after big name talent, then your budget's going to be significantly higher than that, right? We're talking at least $2 to $4 million, right? And it's going to be very, very difficult for you to recoup that money for the investor if it's financed 100% equity, right? So that means that you have to think like a business person. You have to think about how to put together a financing structure that actually makes sense for that level of a budget to mitigate the risks for your investor and then also for yourself. So first thing you need to do is establish a value by pre-selling portion of the domestic and foreign rights, ideally foreign rights at the very least. If you can pre-sell some domestic rights, that's great, but like through Netflix, say if Netflix comes in and you pre-sell to Netflix and they want worldwide, then you're home free, man. Go make your movie, right? But you're not always going to get that. So at the very least, you could take it to the market and try to get some, with the sales agent, and try to get some foreign pre-sales. But that means that you're going to have to figure out what your value of your film is. You're going to have to put together a package that actually makes sense for foreign buyers. You put together a capital structure that includes not just equity, but also soft money and institutional money. And I'll get to what that means in just a minute. And then, of course, spreading allocation of capital across multiple film investments. It's the, you know, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket scenario, right? If you're going to, if it's easier for you to raise money for multiple films with equity investors, because then they're saying, oh, well, we're putting money into not just one film, we're putting money into several films, so that if one tanks, the other one may not, right? It's, again, about mitigating your risk. So allocating that capital across multiple films actually attracts investors more than if you just wanted to put it all into one, risk all the money into one film. So let's look at how do you put together your financing structure. So foreign, through senior secured debt, that's, like I said, you're going to foreign buyers with your packaged project. That means, and we'll talk about what packaging means in just a minute, but basically you already have your director in place, you already have your key talent in place, the producers, you know, you've packaged this film to where when you could take it to a buyer, to a foreign distributor who's interested in buying it and say, we're making this movie with this director that's established director, and the talent that you know, that your people in your country know, and if it's a big enough film, then the buyers will do what's called, they'll pre-buy the film. They'll commit to a certain amount of money in sales up front. Now you're not going to get the money until the movie's delivered, right? but at least you can go to your investors and say, look, we already know we're going to make $2 million from France. So that makes the investor feel more secure, because then it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm not having to foot all the whole bill for this thing, right? So that gives them a little more confidence in the property. A good example of how this was done was, there's a film that was shot here in Texas called Dallas Buyers Club. And I'm sure a few of you have heard of it, right? and so they had, well, and I won't give you the whole sordid backstory, but they had some financing in place. It fell through at the last minute after, Matthew McConaughey, poor guy, had already lost 30 pounds. And so he wasn't going to lose that 30 pounds again. He's like, y'all find the money now, or, just find the money. I ain't doing this again. I'm going to be on set in 30 days. You better find the money. So the producers had to go out there and just beg, borrow, and do everything they could to try to get the financing together. The original budget was 10. Well, they went to, one of the producers had a number of friends who worked for foreign buyers, foreign distributors. He called one of his friends who owed him a huge, huge favor, he was partially responsible for this guy even getting in the industry to begin with. So he called in that huge favor. He got one, but he called it in. And that guy gave him a $2 million commitment pre-sale. And so then those producers were then able to go to some investors here actually in Houston and say, look, it's the minimum we need to go into production in 30 days is $5 million. We can make this work. We're gonna have to cut corners left and right, and our whole makeup budget's only gonna be $200. But it's okay. We're gonna make this work, and we can do this. But we need very minimum $5 million, of which we already have $2 million committed from France, right? Well, the investor's like, oh, okay, well, it's not $5 million I'm investing, it's really $3 million. That's my risk. So think like an investor. Whenever you're going to talk to the investors, think like an investor, right? But in order to do those kinds of deals, you need to have producers who know the distributors and who know the sales agencies who are having those conversations with the buyers, who know the buyers, right? You can't do pre-sales if you don't know the buyers, right? So that's about 20%, you want to have from pre-sales. Gap funding, which is senior unsecured debt, which is like loans, bank loans. There are gap funders out there. There's all kinds of lenders who are willing to give you money with interest. That's guaranteed money back. You have to pay it back off the top of the revenue, the very top, with interest. It's but so that's why that's the smallest percentage, because you don't want to have. Well, first of all, they're not going to give you too much more than that. But yeah, with the right packaged project, there are banks who will loan you money, believe it or not. And then, of course, there's the tax credits, rebates, the state tax credits and rebates. So that's ideally at least 25%, although not here in the state of Texas, sadly. But yeah, you want to film at a location where you're getting at least 25% tax credits or rebates. Some of them go even higher, up to 40%. So do your homework, find out which states are offering the highest tax credits or rebates, and film there. And then, of course, that leaves you with, then you only need to raise 40%. So that seems a little bit more reasonable on a, like if you have a $10 million budget, you're only raising $4 million. You're not having to raise 10, right? So, and if you've done all of these other steps, you've put together you've done some pre-sales, you have a gap funder standing by who's willing to put in the gap funding, and you've done your homework, and you now are shooting in Atlanta or wherever is offering a high incentive. Well, then the investor's like, okay, you've done your homework, you've put together a pretty financially viable product here, and this is something I want to invest in, so that's how you do it, right? Let's see. But going back, but a key component of this is having a distributor, or at the very least, sales agent that you're already working with during development. Don't wait until after you've finished making the movie and say, okay, now I'm going to go get a distributor. That may have worked 10 years ago. That may have even worked for me 5 years ago. What year is this? 8 years ago? 8 years ago? It doesn't work that way anymore. Yes, you could get lucky and get your film in Sundance and get a distributor who's gonna give you some money, but it's not the norm. So you really want to try to get connected with the distributor as soon as you can, because what they're going to do is they're going to help you do this, figure out the value of your film. Okay, so especially the foreign value. So establishing foreign value, the questions you should be asking yourself is, does the film travel? What that really means is, are you going to be able to sell it to Australia and Austria at the same time? Are you going to be able to sell it to the Middle East and Canada? Are you going to be able to, does it travel? Can you sell it all over the world, right? And so what does it take for a film to travel? Well, usually it takes big name actors that everybody in the world knows, right? They're not cheap. They're never going to be cheap. I don't care how good your script is. It's true. So raising the capital to be able to afford those talent, to afford the talent is a key component in creating a product of value. If your film happens to get nominated for a big award, Golden Globe or Academy Award, then yeah, you don't necessarily have to have a huge big name to be able to sell your film internationally, but go watch all the awards and what's been nominated. They all have big name actors in them, right? Every one of them. Well, yeah, no, even Shape of Water has big name actors. So, it's a huge part of the marketplace now, because it is so oversaturated. What's going to make your film stand apart? It's who's in it, largely. That's the number one question our buyers are asking us. So what is the pre-sale value? We've discussed that. What are the real projections? So what are projections? Projections is basically like, you can go to a distributor and they can read your script, figure out like how the quality of the script, the genre of the film, and they can look at your list of talent that you're wanting to cast in the film, and fairly, come up with fairly realistic projections on how much they think that movie is going to make, not just domestically, but also internationally, based on past films of similar genre with similar level of talent. And there's this whole formula that I won't get into. It's really, kind of useless in some ways, actually, but distributors still use it pretty consistently. But it's to help them sort of get a sense of like what they think that movie can actually make. And if you get those projections and you take that to your investor, and you're saying, okay, well, we're going to make this movie for 10 million, and it has, Rooney Mara in it, and it's got, so at least talent, and it's a really, high quality drama with lots of awards potential, and the distributor agrees, and they'll give you the projections, and they'll say, okay, well, we think if it doesn't get nominated for an award, it'll make this much money. If it does get nominated for an award, it'll get that much money. I mean, that's literally how distributors work every single day. So now you can see the value of getting involved with a distributor or a sales agent earlier in the process rather than later, because they can actually help you raise your money through, providing these projections. Now you have to be careful because not all distributors are completely honest about projections. Sometimes they want to be involved as producers of the project, and so they will over project to get the money, because where does that money go? In their back pocket as a producer. So just be very, very careful about that. Happens all the time. So does your sales agency have access to buyers? How do you know? How do you know if your sales agent, the person that you're hiring or you're partnering up with, how do you know that they actually have access to buyers? I mean, anybody, I guess, can start a company and say we're a distributor, right? Do your homework. Find out which films they've represented in the past, what who they sold to. I mean, you can find all that stuff out on IMDb Pro. Just Google the film and go under the companies and see who's representing what, and there's thenumbers.com can help you sort of get a sense of how much money the movie's made on not just the domestic box office, but internationally as well, and not just theatrical, but also in home video and VOD. So do your homework and figure out if that distributor is actually making money on films, right? So this gives you a sense of how many territories here. You've got somewhere around 30. I mean, these aren't all the territories, but these are the major ones. About 30 of them. There's primary territories: France, Germany. The mostly English language, and then you have secondary territories, and then you even have some third and fourth tier territories, which didn't fit on the page, so we're moving on. All right, so establishing the current market value of a film, like I said, establishing foreign value of the actors, the director, and the genre. We mentioned that. So now risk 5, not evaluating a film's target audience prior to investment. So figuring out with your distributor who your target audience is, the size of that audience, and what it's going to cost to reach them. That's the key component, because that's what the distributor is basically telling you the P&A is going to be, right? It's going to cost us this much money to get the film out to this target demographic. And they better have a plan to go with that P&A. It can't just be we're going to spend this money and throw it out into the wind, and then you never really know where it's going or how it's being applied and how it's driving sales. So our company works very closely with the filmmakers, hand in hand, to figure out our release strategy, how much money we're spending on P&A, and so the filmmakers are very aware going into it, what are how much we're spending on our premiere, and how much we're spending on taking it to the Cannes market and to AFM and to EFM. The filmmakers know that going into it. It's very clear. And then sometimes we go over budget, and we'll let them know, hey, we spent a little bit more on whatever for this premiere than we intended to, so we're gonna have to cut back over here. Unless the filmmaker says, no, don't worry about it, we can just, we can go over the budget a little bit, it's up to them. And if you distributor think it's worth, if we think it's worth spending the money, then we will. If we don't, we won't. So and then of course, understanding whether your film is a wide release, a platform release, or a day and date release. So we talked a little bit about day and date already, and wide release is pretty much your typical, what you would consider a theatrical release, where the movie is all over the country, right, in 2,000 plus screens. But that's the studio model. But the independent film model tends to be quite different, and I'm going to show you a graph here. And this was from a friend of mine who he did a presentation of this a number of years ago, and I asked him for permission to use this, and he said it was okay. So this is the traditional theatrical release model. So the major studios will pretty much put the film in initially, like right out of the gate, 3,000 screens, right? Week 1, week 2, still in 3,000 screens. Week 4, all the way to week 6, say, and then they'll start reducing the number of screens, right? So it's a sunk cost model. So it releases wide, driven by TV advertising. The target audience tends to be 12 to 30-year-olds these days. It feels like, with all the comic book movies and so forth. And then it'll, eventually those numbers of screens will go down. That's the sunk cost model. And studios have deep pockets. They have big investors. They got Wall Street investors, for crying out loud, so they can afford that model. Most independent distributors cannot. So we do what's called a variable cost model, which is a platform release driven by word of mouth, largely internet, social media, advertising. Most of us can't afford to do television ads or even radio ads. We can do some newspaper, but a lot of it is driven by film festivals, buzz from film festivals. And so, and the audience could be, the demographics here, are arguable, but 30 plus, you tend to have audiences that are like older who go to some of the prestige films that you see coming out of the festivals. So, independence, the variable cost model, usually like week 1, you have maybe 10 markets or 10 screens that you're on. And if you make money in those screens, then it jumps up to 50. And if you make money on those 50, then it jumps up to 20. But it's and then it goes up and up until potentially up to 1,000 screens. Rarely does it go beyond that. Sometimes if it's like a Academy Award nominated film like Lady Bird, yeah, you'll see it on 2,000 screens. And then of course those screen numbers will dwindle after that. So it's very heavily contingent on performance, which is what a lot of filmmakers don't really understand when they get a distributor. They think it's going to be an automatic increase in screen sales. They'll say, oh, well, we're going to start out with 10 screens, but then we're going to go to more, right? Well, yes, if the film performs well in those 10 screens. It's a huge if, right? And a lot of the money that's being spent by the distributors in the P&A is to make sure those 10 screens that those seats are full, right? And if they are, then they'll put more money into, going wider, and then they'll put more money into P&A. So it's sort of like it's stages. And those stages are heavily contingent on the performance of the, that initial release. So let's see here. So shift in revenue models is also a big thing happening in we mentioned this a little bit earlier. So before, you had very limited shelf space. You only had so many movie theaters, right? With so many screens and so many seats in those screens. You only had so much space at the Blockbuster store to put DVD boxes on, right? So it's very limited shelf space. Now it's unlimited, right? The digital VOD, the digital revolution created unlimited, infinite shelf space. So you can have as many films out in the universe as you can create them at this point. That's great, right, for independent filmmakers, but really not great for distributors. Because like I said, it's diluted our marketplace to where it's really hard to make money on films because the whole supply and demand, too much supply, not enough demand, the cost of things go down, right? So that's what's happening with the distributors. So we're having to be a lot more judicial about the kinds of films that we will take to the market as a result. And like I said, bigger name stars in those films, the better chance you're going to have of getting distributed and getting those films onto the big screen and getting those foreign buyers to pay attention. All right, so there's two kinds of VOD that we're sort of bypassing the theatrical at this point, going into the VOD space. Two types of VOD. Transactional VOD, that's like when you have Xfinity and you buy or rent a movie, right? It's a transaction that takes place for that one film. Then there's also subscription VOD where you actually subscribe to like Netflix, and then you can watch as many movies that are on Netflix, right? So both of those are revenue TVOD and SVOD models. And there's also cable subscriptions, like we mentioned earlier, like Lifetime and Starz have subscription services. Then you have digital downloads like iTunes and Google Play as examples, although there are many more. Then you have new platforms of delivery such as Roku, Apple TV, Google Chromecast, Redbox, Vudu. Now Facebook is distributing feature films. I mean, it's crazy. They're popping up everywhere. It's true. So, my company is distributed on all of these except for Facebook and Roku. So, and I'm sure those are coming. So, just be aware that these are available, these platforms are available, and especially some of the newer delivery, they're directly available to you. You don't even have to go through a distributor or sales agency to access them, right? So there are companies like Distributor, which is a self-distribution platform where they basically work as an aggregator. You pay them a fee, and they could put your movies on all of these platforms, and probably even TVOD and SVOD, and it's a revenue share model. So, what does that mean? Distributor, yeah. Yeah. I've never used them. So, I mean, they're very nice guys. I've met them in person, but I've never actually used them for my personal films, so I can't really say. But, yeah, but do your research, find out, reach out to other people who've distributed through, their film self-distributed through Distributor. And, I mean, like I said, they're very nice guys. And I'm sure that they do great work for, especially some of these films that may not get picked up at the film festivals by IFC or A24 or whoever. So it's certainly a viable option, and you're going to find as more and more people start consuming media online digitally, you're going to see a lot more of the self-distribution model taking place, and then at that point the key won't be who your distributor is. The key will be how much money you have to spend in marketing. It's going to be almost as important to raise money, if not more important to raise money to market the film than it is to make it. Yeah, so. All right. So let's see, then we also have the new foreign digital platforms, like I mentioned earlier, like Sky On Demand and E1. Some of the better ones are the digital platforms that are attached to networks, established companies like E1 out of France, Sky out of UK. They all have television networks there, right? These are television networks in these respective countries, and they also have digital platforms now. So those are the guys that we are going after. And then, so basically, so we talked earlier a little bit about packaging. So what does that mean? So let's talk a little bit about the GREENLIGHT process. You, filmmaker, you have the script, right? Or you've either written it yourself or you've acquired the script through, optioning it or even outright buying it. So the first thing you have to do is sourcing it. You have to secure your rights to the film. So if you've written it, you need to get a copyright. If you did not write it, you need to get, at least an option agreement in place, or acquisition agreement in place. If you bought it outright, you needed to develop the screenplay. Make sure that you take that script to the distributor or sales agency, have them review it, give you some projections based on that current script, and if those projections aren't what you want, figure out why and get those notes from the distributor, because they will give you notes just like a producer will, and say, well, you like the script, but this part right here was very slow, or we think it's not as commercial because of this, that, and that, or whatever. And so then you make those changes if you want. If you don't want, then just lower your budget. If you're like, no, I don't want to change my script and change that aspect. I love that part. I think that's what makes it unique. Okay, great. Well, that means it's less commercial then. So that means that you are now dealing with, instead of a $10 million film, you may be dealing with a $650,000 film. That's the reality. I'm not saying that you should change your script. I'm just saying change your expectations. Okay? And then negotiate ownership, making sure that, so what's going to happen is, even if you wrote the screenplay, at some point that screenplay has to leave your control. It has to go in the control of the production company. That is the company, the entity that is actually producing the story. No producer in their right mind is going to produce a movie and raise money and put all the money into it without having the rights to the script. That's just crazy. So I know people have done it. People who didn't know what they were doing. But yeah, you've got to make sure you have on paper, like, if it's a script you did not write, then you need to make sure you have the rights in place before you go into production. So once that movie's funded, you use a portion of that money to buy the script, to buy the rights to make that movie, right? Based on that script. You pay the writer. On paper, that writer is giving up their rights and giving it to the production company, and for an amount of money, right? It's a transaction. Okay, and if you did write the screenplay and you're producing it, you still need to do that, because the distributor is going to want to see that chain of title. They're going to want to see that the movie they're about to exploit actually has the chain of title in place to be able to, so they don't get sued later. Okay, so that's step one. Step two, packaging. This is where you now have a script that's ready to go, right? You start getting it out to the investors, and you start reaching out to directors. So think about directors who you think would be good for that script. If you want to direct it yourself, that's fine. But for the next step would be to raise development money to try to get actors attached to the film. And then of course you're going to need to have a completed budget. So you have a script, director, actors, and a budget in place. That's your package. Sometimes you may have to repackage it based on, like I said, the commercial value of the script. If the distributor says this isn't commercial and you want it to be commercial, then you got to go back and rewrite. So it starts the whole repackaging process as well. Check out comparable films to your project. Do an analysis. Like I said, actors, role analysis distributors can help you figure out like the value of the talent within the various marketplace. Just because you have a really famous actor from the United States in a U.S. TV series doesn't mean that they're going to star in your movie and it's going to sell to France. Because then France may not have that TV series, or they may have it and not like it, or they may have it and just don't even care about that talent. So make sure that the talent that you're casting is going to actually bring value to your film beyond just the United States. The director, their vision, and their ability. So it's huge, because that's going to determine the level of talent you get, right? Because it's very, very unusual, not impossible, but very unusual for top tier talent to agree to be in a movie with an untested director who hasn't done at least a short film. They could see the quality of their work. I remember when I made my first film, and my lead actress, before she signed on, wanted to see a copy of one of my short films, something of mine. And I sent it to her, and I was nervous as hell, but I sent it to her, and she's like, oh, okay, I guess you saw something there, and agreed to do it. So be prepared to, if you're directing yourself, to be able to show the quality of your work as a director in some format. And then, of course, the budget and schedule analysis, which, yes, the talent agents are going to want to see. So you better have them in place. So if you have all of this in place, then you do a profitability analysis with the distributor. You get your theatrical revenue projections. You get your foreign sales projections, your VOD projections, any licensing commitments, like we said earlier, the pre-sales. You have your capital structure in place. What we talked about earlier, your financing structure, and then of course all your contracts and agreements for the script and with the talent and so forth. Those are all part of your package to moving forward with distribution. And then you secure your capital through, like we said, the secured debt, which is the foreign pre-sales, non-recourse debt, and the available subsidies, that's the tax credits, and then of course any repayments, any loans that you have to put out. And then once you have all of that together, then you can get your investment, you can greenlight the film, and you can move forward. That's development. Before you even start making the movie, you got to do all of this stuff. I know. It's hard because you got this great script and you just want to go shoot it, right? That's the people ask me all the time, what's the biggest mistake that filmmakers make? They rush into production. They don't do their due diligence. They don't develop their scripts, and they don't put together a package that is actually going to help them sell the movie. Now, sometimes you can actually make a movie without doing all this stuff, and you may get lucky like me, and somebody will buy it, and you'll make your money back. It's extremely rare to make your money back on your first film, by the way. It's extremely rare to make your money back even on your second sometimes. So like, at least be informed of how the process should work so you can make very informed decisions. And if you don't want to mess with all this stuff and you just want to go shoot your film, great, do it. I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm telling you absolutely 100% do it. Just keep your budget very, very low, because you're never going to make your money back if you don't develop that script and develop that property to make it something that's truly of value to the marketplace, right? You know, it's not just necessarily finding a distributor, it's finding the right distributor. And maybe that's where her issue is, because she may be fully aware of how Hollywood accounting works, and she may be fully aware that, you know, a lot of distributors don't offer minimum guarantees. We do, generally speaking, but we try to at least. But it's all about looking at those projections and saying, okay, how much money do we think we can make on this film? And then we take a financial risk as a distributor to give them that guarantee, which could either be, you know, off the top of the sales, or it can be a cash advance. And so if it's cash advance, that means we're serious. We really think we can make money on this film. And so we put that money into it, but we recoup it out of the sales. So it's not like the filmmakers, you know, making any money really. I mean, they are making money, but it's coming out of the sales, so we're making our money back out of the sales. And but that, at least they have something to give back to their investors right off the top. So that's always good. And it may be that the deals that she's getting are just not, they don't have an MG or, you know, or whatever. So I don't know, just, you know, have her get in touch with me and we'll take a look at it. If you do your job right, it's going to take months at the very least. And I know films that were in development for 15 years, you know, before they were able to get all the financing together to do it. So what you're doing here is you're developing a product that, and you're going through these stages to try to make sure that product has value in the marketplace, and you're doing it in a way that actually maximizes your chances of making that money back for that investor. And so if you don't do these things, I mean, you could throw caution to the wind and go out and spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions, not hundreds of millions, but you know, millions of dollars on producing a film without any distribution in place or any kind of real understanding of what that value of that film is in the marketplace. But your chances of making the money back for that investor are very low. I mean, it's low. It's hard to make your money back anyway. So you have to, you know, if you do these things, go through these stages, at the very least you can demonstrate to your investors you're doing everything you can to make sure that you're putting together a package, you're putting together a product that is actually going to be able to make their money back.
So that would be like for the same as Seed and Spark or Kickstarter if you're...
Well, those are little different scenarios, because those are like you're basically raising money through crowdsourcing. That's different from investing.
But then they're your investors, right?
Well, they can be. You can actually solicit investors through crowdfunding now. I don't know of anyone who's done it, but it's possible, thanks to the Jobs Bill of a few years ago, I think 2015. And by the way, that also helps you get investors, because I've seen films that have gone out and raised $50,000. In fact, I've done this. What am I talking about? We've raised $50,000, and then we through that crowdfunding project, we were able to get a couple of people who donated to the then, you know, or contributed. I forgot. Donate is not the word. Contributed to your crowdfunding campaign, but then came back and said, you know, we really like what you're doing. We'd be willing to donate or to give more as an investor. And so we were able to pick up a couple of investors through the crowdfunding process. And then once you've raised the money, that, you know, and you have 500 people who give you enough up to $50,000, then you can go to the investors and say, look, we have this, you know, this is obviously a story people are wanting to see, because they gave us $50,000. 500 people gave us $50,000, and that's pretty impressive. You know, even now it's impressive. So, and then some of these crowdfunding, and I haven't done this myself again, but they are now creating their own platforms like Seed and Spark, where you can actually distribute the films through them. So Indiegogo was partnering with distributor, I think, at one point, and I'd seen Smart, I believe, have created their own platform. I may be wrong, so don't hold me to that. But yeah, they're getting into the distribution game now too. So it's kind of the Wild West out there. So you got to figure out your own path, but figure it out before you start shooting, because at least you have a plan. And that plan rarely works out the way you planned it to be. It almost never does. But you have a plan, so that way, at least whenever you come to a fork in the road where you have to make a decision or deviate from that plan, you can do it in an informed way and not just sort of like, blindly move forward without really knowing what's going to happen. It's the more you understand about the motion picture marketplace and the various kinds of outlets of distribution, the better you can put together a plan of action that you take to your investor and say, this is going to be our plan. It's not, and that they understand what they're putting their money into. Like I said, I'm a huge proponent of investors being educated. And that's your job to educate them, because many of them don't know the first thing about investing in film or don't know anything about the motion picture industry. So if you become informed and you become, you get a sense of how the marketplace, of what the marketplace is like and how, what films are being picked up and so forth, that just makes you a more informed filmmaker. When you go to those investors, they're going to sense that you know what you're talking about, right? There's no legal connect. There's no legal connect. I mean, you couldn't get the distributor to sign an NDA, basically saying that they can't, talk about your film. It's non-disclosure agreement, NDA, and I sign them all the time. And so, we basically will read the script, or we'll even, sometimes the film's already in a rough cut stage, we'll watch the rough cut, and we'll give that filmmaker, we'll say, okay, well, this is a well-made film, or it's a well-written script. If you make a quality film, if you take the script and you actually turn it into a quality film with, and typically we don't just ask for the script, we also ask for a list of talent that they're wanting. Then based on the talent, based on the quality of the script, we can give them, give them these projections. Now, they're projections. There's no guarantee you're actually going to make that money, but it's at least you have some tangible information you could, or some kind of information you could take to the investors and say, we spoke with, this distributor. They're interested in the film. The distributor is not guaranteeing you that we're going to pick up the film. They are just saying that we would be interested in distributing this film if you made this film at a high quality level with this people from this list of cast that you've sent to us. We would be interested.
Going to the multiple distributors and getting, you wouldn't be.
Yeah, you can go to multiple distributors. Absolutely, you're not tied to one. There's no commitment on either party's part to go into business with each other. It's just basically saying, this is what we have to offer. Sharing information, right? Okay. No, don't be surprised when that distributor is going to be trying to hard sell you to sign up with them, at least to be your sales agent, because that's what they do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because like I said, if they have connections with foreign buyers, they can go pre-sell your movie before you start shooting anything. So it might actually be in your best interest to have them sign on as at least a sales agent. So, yeah.
And then
Well, I like AFM. AFM's great. The films at AFM, holy cow.
I've always heard it's.
You've been, right? Have you been? No, okay, yeah.
What does it stand for?
American Film Market, yeah. Some of the films at AFM are not great. But, and you see, and it's so crazy because they put these like flyers everywhere, not flyers, but the banners everywhere, and you're just like, you can tell just by looking at the banners that they're awful. Anyway. But
to meet distributors and stuff like that, not necessarily to.
That's a great place to go to meet distributors, yes. But when you go there, don't just be like, hey, I just wanted to meet you. I mean, actually bring them something. Sure. Don't waste their time. If you have something that you actually think would fit, and do your research on the distributors too. Don't just go walk into, you don't want to take a comedy script to a distributor does mostly horror, right? So do your research, find out who's there, try to get meetings with distributors who distribute the kind of films that you're looking to make. And then take those meetings, bring a one sheet. You know what a one sheet is? Yeah, like a one sheet. Oops, hello. One sheet is like a movie poster, but yeah. You don't have to bring a big giant movie poster. Bring like a little mock-up of one. And so they could see visually, you know, kind of the tone of your film, the look of your film. They can see, you know, just sort of the, you know, maybe some of the names of the talent that are in the film or that you want to be in the film. And, you know, give them something that they can physically hold, because they'll probably just put it in a stack and then have somebody sort through them later. But at least you've given them something, and they can reference later to look back on. And, you know, do your pitch, and they'll say one or two things. We really like the story, send us the script. And then you better make sure you send the script like right away. Don't wait 3 months, because they will have long forgotten you. They will probably forget you the next like 5 minutes later. But they'll remember more easily if you send them the script the next day versus 3 months later. 3 months later, they're like, I don't know who this is, I don't care. You know, so send them the script right away, and then if they're interested, they'll contact you, and if they're not, you may never hear from them again. And that there's a saying in the industry: no answer is an answer. Well, when I say target audience, I mean a demographic. So like, you need to at very least know, like, is it more, well, let's break it down. Is it female or male driven? Do you think more of your audience is this movie going to attract more men or more women? Right? One or the other. Okay, well, now you know that. Well, what age of men or women? Is it going to be 12 to 24? Or is it going to be, you know, 30 plus? Is it going to be 50 plus? I mean, what is your age demographic, right? And then you can break it down even further to that, to ethnic background, to, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of ways of breaking down a demographic, right? It could be LGBT. It could just be like, we think this is a great film for, you know, LGBT in their, I mean, I'm watching a film right now for the Indie Spirit Awards. I love it. I'm not even LGBT, but I love it. It's LGBT film, and called Women Who Kill. It's just a hilarious film. And I would have never seen this film if I hadn't have like gotten it as a screener for Indie Spirit, right? And so they didn't market to me because I'm not their target demographic, I guess. But I, you know, got the screener, watched it. It's hilarious. I love it. So just because it's not targeted to that demographic doesn't mean it can't reach a wider demographic. But you do, as if you're going to distribute, need to tell them very clearly, my film is targeted to this group of people, and this is how I plan to reach this group of people. First of all, you have to know who your target demographic is based on the story and the characters of the story and the demographic of the characters in the story, right? I mean, I think possibly. I mean, I think that it's, you know, you can do test markets and that kind of thing, yeah.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you set that up?
I've never done one before, so to be honest with you, but maybe you can do like a public, like if you want to do like a public reading of your script, if it's in script form, do a public reading of your script and invite everybody to come out, you know, of all different ages and demographics, and do questionnaires afterwards to see which ones were most affected by the story, had the most, you know, the ones who tended to gravitate and connect with the story more than the others. That's a way to do it.
Okay.
Unless you have big pockets to hire an ad agency who can do those market analyses. I can't talk.